Today, we're diving into one of the biggest topics on the planet, climate change. But, we're not just going to give you a lecture. We're going to treat this like a formal debate, putting the arguments on trial to see what really holds up under pressure. So, let's get into it.
So, here it is. This is the motion on the table. Climate change is the greatest threat facing humanity today. That is a massive claim, right? A really heavy statement. Our job today is to look at the evidence and see if it actually backs that up.
Now, any good debate needs rules. You can't just have people yelling opinions at each other. It's about building a case, brick by brick. So before we jump into the arguments themselves, let's quickly go over the super simple but really powerful framework we'll be using to break it all down. We're going to use a model called ARE. It's super straightforward. First, you have the assertion. That's the bold claim. Next, you've got the reasoning, the why behind the claim, the logic. And finally, and this is the most important part, you have the evidence, the hard data, the facts that prove your point. We're going to use this little toolkit to test every argument we hear today.
Okay, with our framework in place, let's hear the case for the motion. Here comes the first major argument for why climate change is, in fact, our #1 threat.
So the first assertion is a heavy one. Climate change isn't just an environmental problem, it's an existential security threat. This completely reframes the issue. We're not just talking about the planet, we're talking about our safety, our survival as a civilization.
So what's the reasoning behind that? Well, it's this concept of a threat multiplier. Think of it like this. Climate change takes existing problems, like a shaky government or a food shortage, and it basically pours gasoline on the fire. It puts massive stress on our infrastructure, our food, our water, and that creates instability that can ripple across the entire globe.
And for evidence, just look at this number. 70,000. That's how many people died in a single heat wave in Europe back in 2003. And this is key. This isn't some future projection from a computer model. This has already happened. It's a real, devastating human cost, and it's a number we can't ignore.
All right, assertion number 2. This one argues that the environmental risks we're facing aren't just big, they're actually speeding up. They're accelerating.
And the reasoning is pretty clear because, well, we can see it all around us. We're seeing more intense hurricanes, more destructive wildfires. The gigantic ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica, they're melting faster, causing sea levels to rise at an accelerating pace. All of this puts a fundamental strain on the very systems that keep us fed and watered. Now for the evidence on this point. Listen to this quote. The consensus of the scientific community is that these risks now endanger the very foundations of modern civilization. I mean, just let that phrase sink in for a second. When the overwhelming majority of experts in a field are using language that is that strong, you know it's serious. Okay, so that's a pretty compelling case. But hey, a real debate isn't a monologue, right? A strong case has to be able to stand up to some tough questions. So let's bring in the opposition and look at some of the common counterarguments. You've probably heard these before. First, the idea that the climate has always changed, it's natural. Second, the argument that it's the sun's fault, not ours. And third, the claim that all this talk about sea level rise is just overblown and exaggerated. Let's see how these points actually fare when we put them to the test. And that brings us to my favorite part of any debate, the rebuttal. This is where the gloves come off, It's where we test the arguments directly and see what's left standing. And that's exactly what this is all about. It's not enough to just state your case and walk away. You have to face the counter-arguments head-on. So let's put these skeptical claims side by side with the scientific data and see what happens. First up, the climate's changed before. And the rebuttal? Yeah, it absolutely has. But here's the thing. It has always changed in response to what scientists call a forcing, a primary driver. In the past, that might have been a change in the Earth's orbit or massive volcanic activity. The crucial difference now is that the data is crystal clear. Today, the dominant forcing is us. It's human activity. Okay, what about the idea that it's the sun? This one is really interesting because the rebuttal comes straight from the data. Over the last 35 years or so, while our planet has been getting warmer and warmer, the sun's energy output has actually been going slightly down. The two trends are literally moving in opposite directions. So the data just doesn't line up.
And finally, the claim that sea level rise is exaggerated. The counter to this one is all about the power of corroborating evidence. It's not just one measurement from one team. We've got data from tide gauges on the coasts, from deep sediment cores, and from high-tech satellites orbiting the Earth. And you know what? They all tell the exact same story. The seas are rising, and the speed of that rise is increasing. And really, this brings us to what is perhaps the most powerful piece of evidence in the entire debate. After all the back and forth, you land on this number: 97%. Around 97% of climate experts agree that humans are causing global warming. To get that level of consensus on anything in science is, well, it's just staggering. It's about as close to a settled fact as you can get.
So, we've heard the main arguments, we've seen the counterclaims, and we've watched the rebuttal unfold. Now it's time to take a step back, look at everything we've covered, and deliver the final verdict on this debate. So, what's the verdict from our little debate today? Well, the side arguing for the motion built its case using that clear ARE structure. They presented credible threats to both human security and the environment, and crucially, their rebuttal was able to successfully counter the main points from the opposition, using scientific data. So based on the evidence presented today, the proposition's case stands strong. So, there you have it. The evidence is on the table, and the arguments have been tested. Within this structure of this debate, the motion carries. But that leaves us with a much bigger, much more important question that goes way beyond a debate. The question isn't really if the threat is real anymore. The question is, what are we going to do about it?